Okay, in this last video, I just want to go over an assessment that is typically at the end of a lesson or at the end of a unit. And let's try to see whether or not it's assessing things that we think should be assessed or if things are operating at the right level of cognition that they specify. So in the first case, 1, recall what agreement did Christopher Columbus make with the Queen, or with Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand of Spain? Okay, so the question is this a recall goal? And so it depends on what you're going for here. If we keep it at the recall goal, we are just looking for facts about what actually happened. In other words, it could be as simple as they paid for him to explore, hoping they'd get rich and meet some other things. Maybe it's those 3 things that we talked about earlier. Also expand their kingdom or empire and gain Catholic converts. So it could be those things, but what exactly we mean by that would need to be specified in our goals. If I want them to remember something, I need to teach them so they will remember it by bringing it up over and over and over again to where that kind of, path in their memory. If we think about the explain, we are usually thinking about a comprehension level goal. Not always, but again, it just depends. So explain, where did Columbus think he had landed when he reached the Bahamas? The recall level answer is, India or Asia. Yeah, you could be one or the other, right? If we're going for a comprehension, we need something more than that. Not just where did he think as a fact, but why did he think that and why he was mistaken about it. And that would have to involve something of understanding that people in Europe did not know that this other continent or these other continents existed. It might have some belief about the Earth being round, confirmation bias. I'm not sure. But to me, this explaining, what you're probably going to get is a fact-based answer or recall-based answer, because it's asking for a specific location and not a why. So even though they have it as a comprehension kind of prompt, you're probably going to get a bunch of recall level answers. And I would say that it's going to function more at the recall level. Evaluate. I'll guarantee this is not going to be evaluation. Evaluation, again, requires knowledge of a deep structure, which means that you need to analyze a particular task and select particular strategies and do all this internally. And so this evaluate, how did Columbus's voyage lead to a dispute between Spain and Portugal? So the first thing that makes it not evaluation is that what happened was already covered in the text. And I can answer this at a recall level by just recalling what I read, even if I don't understand it, right? So we know from the facts that Columbus went, they discovered new lands, people wanted a piece of the action, and then Spain and Portugal had some disagreement about who was allowed to go where. That was resolved by the Pope, followed by a treaty. Again, all that stuff is not evaluation. It's not even analysis. It's not even application. It's recall or maybe comprehension, but it's really just a series of recalled facts. So when you see these terms, don't assume that it is indicating a real level of Bloom's taxonomy. When I say something like identify, I could mean recall, I could mean comprehension, I could mean application, I could even mean analysis. Wouldn't mean evaluation or synthesis, but it could be any one of those first 4. So identify, who was the first European explorer to see the Pacific Ocean? This again is going to be a recall-based answer. It's something you covered, it's something you went over. There's no thinking, there's no newness that would have to take place. The summarizing of what route did Ferdinand Magellan's ships take to circumnavigate the globe is also not anything really more than recall. It could be comprehension, but when you think about what are they going to have to do, they're going to have to look at this little map of where he went. Let's see, thought it was in here. I guess it wasn't. There's just an explanation of that he went around the world. Um, okay, so what does it mean to summarize that? Do they need to know that he sailed, around the southern tip of South America and then had to, traverse around Australia through the Indian Ocean and all this stuff? I don't think so. Not really covered. So I'm not sure what they're even looking for here. And I don't really even think it's functioning at a comprehension level. Drawing conclusions. Maybe this could be application, unless they already were given the answer. How did the Columbian exchange and slave trade affect the economies and the people of Europe, Africa, and the Americas? Now, so this is one of the big things that we will have to deal with. If they want this to be an application type question, what has to happen is they need to have enough knowledge about what did happen to draw those conclusions. And if you haven't taught it to them yet, why in the world would they know? And this is one of the things we'll need to deal with application type questions, is that if we want them to apply knowledge, we need to give them everything they need to know in order to apply it. And this will come up in other examples later on. Finally, we have this critical thinking prompt, supporting a point of view. Review your notes on European exploration. Then copy the graphic organizer below and use it to rank in order the two most important results of the European voyages to the Americas. Explain your choices in the Y column. Now, this is a good thinking exercise, but it's not a good assessment. Because again, students don't know what happened down the line unless it was given to them in a fact. And then maybe they're doing some kind of evaluation, and that's kind of where this would really hope to fall. You are comparing things, but based on what? We don't know. And students kind of come up with their own thing. Some are based in reality, some are based on personal opinion, some are based on just personal preferences or a gut feeling. And the question is, does that tell you anything about whether they learned something you were teaching? Not much. But what it does do is tell you where they're at and how they're thinking about it. So that can be very useful for you as a teacher, but not as an assessment of what was learned, but an assessment of how students are thinking and what they care about. Two very different things. And then focus on writing. Write some notes about what life might have been for Columbus and his crew as they sailed across the Atlantic. Note ways in which their voyage changed life for many Europeans. Again, they don't really know the ins and outs of how life changed. You can imagine, but again, this is not an assessment of any learning really, or anything that we really care about in this particular lesson. And so while it's a good instructional activity to get them thinking about, well, what would it be like to get some perspective, it doesn't really tell you whether they learned anything that you taught them or whether they're getting the big picture of things. So, especially in social studies textbooks, we need to be careful about assessments at the end of different sections, lessons, or units, because oftentimes they're pretty much fact-based, even though they parade as something else. And oftentimes they're aligned to goals that are not obvious. When you think about how many of these reflect the main idea of the goals, not many of them do, and some go really far afield. And so when you're looking at your particular assessments that you're making, make sure you stay locked in on those goals and you figure out for each prompt you have or each section, am I really assessing the thing I want to assess, or am I asking them to do a bunch of other stuff? Okay, good luck.